Um, Thank you everyone for being here and the RECAS for providing this space for us to also have a discussion about really important topics. And also to Azra, of course, for agreeing to be here with us today. It's early morning for her, so we're really, really extra thankful for this. Azra is a professor of anthropology and professor of teaching excellence at Syracuse University in the USA. She has worked a lot on anthropology of international policy in the context of state making in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You probably know her first book with the title Citizens of the Empty Nations, Youth and the State Making in Post-War Bosnia and Herzegovina, where she touched more directly on practices of young people and the system that's in place there and how those two kind of interact. But then there is also like a new agenda she has been working on more extensively connected to Riverine citizenship and how young people, and not just young people, but also just citizens that live with UNA, engage and love UNA. So I have asked her today to kind of speak a little bit more about some of the key concepts and the ideas behind her book. I've decided to kind of structure the seminar in a way that she has a little bit more time at the beginning to introduce and speak about like how she structured the book and the key concepts behind it. And then the second half of the semester, sorry. It was a long semester, but the second half of the seminar is actually for the questions. So please, if you have any questions, just like raise your hand and we can have a bit more of an interactive discussion afterwards. This will be like a really short intro from my side. Thank you again so much, Azra, for taking the time, and I give the word to you.
Thank you so much, everyone, especially Ajda, for this lovely introduction and for the invitation. And I'm grateful we finally found time to meet because we flirted with a couple of different dates, but it worked out today. And thank you, Tina, for all the work you did to make this possible. And coffee in Rijeka is on me, just so we have it on record, okay? I have all these witnesses. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my most recent book that is titled Riverine Citizenship. It was published by Central European University Press, and it's free to download online. So if anyone is intrigued or interested in what I say today, please check it out and stay in touch and ask questions even beyond today. So I always start by dedicating this talk and this book to my late father, Azra Hromadžić, who was a man truly in love with the city. And here he is in the photo with my mother and my children and by the Una River, of course. I just want to remind everyone, I'm sure that many of you know this, but sometimes the audience, I don't want to assume that everyone knows that the amount of pressure that the Balkans are witnessing in terms of extraction of natural resources as they're framed natural resources, right? So the blue heart of Europe is the new frontier of dispossession in the Balkans. And what I mean by that is that the Balkans are still in the West especially, but in the Balkans as well, framed through epistemologies of knowledge production, framed around ideas of destruction, ethnic and national logics, and post-socialist, and then post-socialist dispossession. When I was doing my early work in Mostar, post-socialist dispossession was not even something you could get grants to study if you study the Balkans. You had to focus on the war. More recently, we see openings about discussion about post-socialist experiences in the Balkans. And now we see nature as the latest frontier of both political interest, economic interest, and academic interest as well. And nature, I'm putting in quotation marks here. We can discuss it later. I don't have that much time here to unpack it, but I'm happy to talk about it later. So in Europe, the Balkans and beyond, the Balkans have become a major front line of green capitalism and green extraction. And this is because of several converging forces. One is the wider geopolitical demand to develop. And I extensively discuss this in the book, this pressure to join the Europe through sustainable economies, right? And by doing so by extracting and capitalizing on very significant water resources. So the Balkans is the biggest freshwater depository in Europe. About 3,500 micro hydropower plants are being planned to be built. Some of them are already in the process of being built. 400 in Bosnia alone, because Bosnian wild rivers are such good target to these kinds of development projects. But there's also a lot of resistance around it, and that's what I'm going to focus on. So these pressures from the EU are often packaged in the language of renewable energy, sustainability, and green transition, but actually they're instances of green capitalism, green grabbing, green statecraft, and green opposition or eco-activism. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Just to tell you, for those of you who might not know a little bit about the UNA, I mean, almost everyone in the region knows about the UNA, but I don't want to assume, I would rather say, why is the Una River kind of unique among this larger development scheme that's happening in the Balkans now? As most of you know, the Una River forms the part of Bosnia's natural border with Croatia and therefore with the EU. It's known for its emerald-colored, fast currents and ecological value, and for keeping people in Bihać safe and sane during the most recent war. And I have a whole chapter in the book about swimming in the river, and I'm going to come to that in my presentation in a little bit. What's important about the river, and it became especially important 2 years ago, is that actually the spring of the river is in Croatia. So the river originates in Zandarska Županija, in Donja Suvaja in Croatia, and after 5 kilometers, it enters Bosnia, where it becomes immediately a national park. So where it emerges in Croatia, it's really a marginalized both ethnically and economically part of Croatia. Many people from Zagreb don't even know how to get to Srb or Donja Suvaja. It's a small Serb population that lives in that area. And then immediately, so right there in Croatia, it's not part of popular imaginary, but as soon as the river enters Bosnia, it becomes a big deal. It becomes a national park. So this spring, located in Croatia, was protected as a natural monument in '68 and then became part of EU's Natura 2000, again, a network of protected natural monuments. However, that didn't prevent, again, the forces of green capitalism to attempt building a dam on the spring of the river in Croatia. So I'm going at the end, if I have time, quickly mention that protest, but what I'm going to focus on today is the attempt to build a dam building project in the context of these larger forces of renewable energy and joining the Europe type rhetoric. I'm going to focus on 2015 protests because that's what the book is about. If I have time, I'll refer to 2024 as well. So in July 2015, in Bihać is a city who claims to be, or this is an official tourist slogan in Bihać now, a city in love with the river, witnessed a big protest, actually. Thousands of people came together, and you see in the back here, here is the ethnographer. I don't know if you can see me all the way to the left. And then there's my brother. Yes, Tina, that's him. And then there's his dog as well. So we attended this protest. So thousands of people got together, mostly digitally. 11,000 people signed a petition, and about 50 of us showed up in person. And I can speak to why only 15%. We objected the city's recent decision at that time in 2015 to give a concession to a joint Russian and Bosnian energy company to build a dam on the city's river Una. The Una frames Bosnian northwestern border with Croatia, and it's famous, as I said, for its beauty and emerald color and for keeping us sane during the war. Armed with love for the river and the political agency this emotion generated, this protest was called "We Will Not Give the Una," led to a politically significant outcome, and this is very important. Pressured by the people, the city government reversed its decision to grant a concession to this Bosnian-Russian company to build a small dam in the heart of the national park, very close to Štrbački Buk, the main waterfall on the river. So this was the only reversal of city's government's decision on any matter in its post-war history. In other words, Bosnian Spring was not as successful. Nothing was reversed in terms of governmental decisions. This is the first successful protest. So my book starts with a question, why was this successful when nothing else was successful before? And while I joined the protest viscerally because I care about the river, this was not subject of my research at the time, but only later, this question really became a big question. Why did it work this time around? And why it worked is because of something I called Riverine citizenship. So I want to walk us through what kind of form this citizenship takes, what is this thing, and what is its content. Very anthropological question, right? So now the next slide is a little bit to introduce you to how I went from this moment in the field, and this is how it often happens in ethnography, research questions arrive unexpectedly from everyday encounters. This is then how I thought about it theoretically and methodologically. Theoretically, the book is promiscuous. I flirt with pretty much everything out there, literatures that are usually not knotted together, such as literatures on love, affect, and politics in political philosophy and feminist scholarship, anthropology of the senses, anthropology of the subterranean world, studies of war ecologies, sociological theories about lived citizenship, and interdisciplinary research on place, more than human geographies, pedagogies, new materialisms, indigenous and environmental humanities, and more. Methodologically, it is mostly in ethnography. However, I also, as you saw, participated in protests. I did more archival research than I ever thought I would. I did a whole summer of sensorial and sound ethnography where with a friend and colleague, Amer Husak, we went and actually recorded the river along different kind of junctures. And we created a radio piece, actually 45-minute piece about sounds of the river, and which are then where my ethnographic field notes are superimposed on top of the sound of the river. I used the personal memory of living in Bihać during the war. I did some investigative journalism, and I relied on works of fiction, especially Faruk Šehić's knjiga o Uni, or Quiet Flows to Una. So how do I theorize this? So this is my theory and ethnography method background, but how do I conceptualize this river in citizenship? So this is the most theoretical slide. I had 4 slides about this, but I'm reducing them to 1. And what is this thing? So I was inspired by a wonderful book called On Borders, written by Paulina Ochoa Espejo, who published this book in 2020. And building on her ideas about place and belonging, I conceptualized riverine citizenship through the notion of watershed. Watershed, I understand, and riverine citizenship by extension, as place-based, not identitarian form of collective action. And I think about watershed and therefore riverine citizenship topologically, not topographically. And what I mean by that is topography, when we use topography to think about belonging, action, activism, or politics, this is grounded usually in fixed borders and territory. This is basically the map we usually look at, right? Ethnic groups in ethnic territories, nations in their lands, right? Borders. However, topological perspective kind of challenges that. It doesn't fully overcome it, but allows us to focus on flows and relations and connectivity and interdependence of different elements. And I feel that thinking with watershed allows us to recognize topography, but also mobilize topology to think politics. So the watershed is not just then in my concept, how I conceptualize it, is not just a hydrological unit as it's often conceptualized in geography, but it's a political and ecological assemblage that links humans, animals, plants, infrastructures, and material forces in what Ivan Rajković would call motley alliances. Like, let's nod to Ivan, who is a big friend of mine and of the book too. So bringing these things into unlikely alliances. Riverine citizenship is rooted in where people are and not necessarily who they are. So not your ethnicity, not your nationality, but thinking about belonging to place beyond nationalism. Because I think nationalist rhetoric's hijacked the way we think about place. So we can think about responsibility to place where we live without being fully suffocated by thinking nationalism. And I think that's a crack we need to inhabit. So for many residents of Bihać and beyond in the Una River watershed, Where they are is next to the Una River and what they call Unski Život, or Una way of life, next to the river, in the river, with the river. So this framework, I think, helps explain alliances that cut across social and political differences. So when you see who gathered at the protest, both in Croatia, when you think that both Rundek and Most and Pupovac, all of them mobilized around this, like unlikely alliance, politically, from any point of view. You have these combinations of groups and individuals that you cannot explain in typical way of thinking politics. And I think thinking Watershed and Riverine citizenship helps a little bit. So Riverine citizenship, I argue, constructs in the book constructs belonging and obligations from below, it's grounded in watershed rather than ethnicity, nation, or state. So the key idea, to summarize all this, is the watershed functions as connective tissue, generating forms of citizenship, belonging, and political action that's organized around relation to the river, and agency is located in relation. Not in the river, not in the people, in the relation between the two. So this is what I emphasize throughout the book. Rather in conventional territorial borders, like the desert island way of thinking political theory, which I think we have to overcome. So this is how the book, and I think I will very quickly go through this. I'm really cognizant of time, and I know you have another meeting at 4, but this is how the book flows. So the first chapter is about the Una River emeralds. So in order to explain why this work and how riverine citizenship developed, I had to go back to socialism. So the first chapter is about this socialist organization called the Una River Emeralds. The second chapter is about how people traverse the Una, how it focuses on senses beyond just the visual. So I look at tactile things, sounds, and not just the visual, which is usually how Una is depicted through visual. And then the third chapter looks at swimming in the river during the war. And the fourth chapter is the actual protest. The fifth chapter is grammar of the protest was love, where I love Una became a political slogan. And then the last one is the limitations of this kind of love and slow death of the river due to touristification of the region. So I know I don't have time to go in depth, but I'm just very going to quickly tell you a little bit about each. So the first chapter is I'm kind of mesmerized or impressed by this individual called Boško Marjanović, who in '84 established the Una River Emeralds, which was a children's organization that at one point in 91 had 113,000 members from 97 countries in the world. And so the idea, this is riverine citizenship. You don't need to be from Bihać or from the watershed to belong. You just need to care and love in a certain way. Okay, so Boško Marjanović understood this, and he created this children's organization, and he envisioned Bihać to be the ecological center of the world, of the children of the world. So here the kids still celebrated. Una has its own birthday. It's on May 17th. It's widely acknowledged and celebrated. And this organization had two main philosophical slogans. The Una River should not be protected from people. We should teach people to guard Una. And clear mind, clear Una. And one thing that they accomplished in socialism is that they were able to actually enter the curriculum. We had ecology as a subject during socialism in schools. After the war, it was replaced with religion, which tells you enough. But so I just want to say this was a very systemic effort, the effort that all of us who lived in Bihać felt. We were actually, without even sometimes knowing, enrolled in Una River Emeralds sometimes from birth. And I go in depth in the book, showing how the emeralds actually sent cards to all newborn children, welcoming them to the Emerald City, what they called. So very systemic. I don't have time to go in details, but I want to say that even though since Boško died, they're not as prolific as they used to be, there are reminiscences of this still visible in Bihać and beyond. For example, you can see on the right, this is my son. He was, I was doing research on another topic, he and I were coming back from school and stopped by the river, and he said, "Mom, which river is this?" I said, "The Una River," and he grabbed the label that detached from the bottle that was cooling off in the river, and he said, I'm her protector. because he was enrolled in the Emeralds without my knowledge, and they were teaching them how to protect the river. So this is also, the Una and the Una. My daughter is Una, of course. And there are other examples I don't have time to go into, but the chapter is very rich with examples of this. The second thing, so this is very important to understand Riverine citizenship. We have to understand the emeralds and the milieu they created, right? That project was not seemingly political. It was about kids and innocence, right? But actually it created what I call political repository for Riverine citizenship to emerge. Then the second thing is everyday living with the river, what I call traversing the river, how people really spend time with the river, in the river. So this is the one where I spend a lot of time talking about the smell that people describe, that Una is kind of oily. It has a particular smell. One person said Una was our war perfume, right? So this is the whole second chapter, looks at color, the sound, the scent, the subterranean, imaginaries about the subterranean world, because the soil, the karst soil is very porous. So the whole the regime of senses around the river and spending time with the river. Spending time with the river feeds into Unski Život, or the Una style of life. As one person said, life without the Una is an unimaginable life in Bihać. So these things, the Emerald's teaching and every day living with the river, were deepened during the war when Bihać was under siege. And actually, we ended up swimming in the river during summers, especially during 93 when there was a ceasefire. And I describe this in the book very vividly, how some people say this was the most beautiful time of their lives. So this is about joys of war, about a river bringing people together to swim together and create what I call communitas, fun during the war. One person jokingly said, we are all marked by this swimming together because we all have the same scar, because we all hit the same cedra going down the waterfall number 6. So I could go on and on about this, but so the pre-war experiences were then deepened during the war, when we spent an enormous amount of time running away from the war, from the sounds of shelling, destruction, death, hunger, into the river that carried us together with each other. So the river became a glue that brought us together. So I'm not going to go there. So that maybe just the last thing is that creates this kind of multi-species conviviality and communitas between the people and the river. All that became a context that when in 2015, Una came under attack and we were not even fully aware of it, all that created a repository that then allowed us to come to protest and to push against the plans to build a dam. So I will not go into this because I know that we don't have that much time. But I want to emphasize, so I spent the whole chapter 4 explaining who, how, doing. This is the investigative journalism part of the book, where I really try to unpack the protest and how it unfolded. And one of the things that chapter 4 concludes with is that the grammar of protest was love, because Bihać basically became Grad zaljubljenu rijeku, or city in love with the river. As you can see on the left, this is the official now motto of or logo of the Bihać tourist office, because people said that the 2015 protest was unique and special because of the love, and I can the grammar of love. What's interesting to me is that the only pushback I ever get about the book is this, that like, oh, it's not about love. They also destroyed the river, and there's so much more. But I think it's really naive then to think about love that way. I was inspired by Bell Hooks, who says that every social movement that's successful has love at its core. It's just how I think we have problem thinking with love a little bit in terms of politics, and so I spend a lot of time talking about politics and love in this chapter. And so this love for many people became both metaphorical and literal. And what was important, that from that kind of recognition, now Una became politicized. Una became a political subject. Or Edin Morankic, who was a deputy mayor at the time, when I was doing research, but who participated in protests, he said Una became the key word. Like every political party has Una in their platform now, including their platform. So So I think I will skip this to give you more time. So I think just to emphasize that this threat to the river felt that Život itself was at stake, Unski Život, and therefore life, because there's no life without Unski Život, right? That was at stake, and that if something happens to the river, and this early dam would just be the first of many, and if you let this to happen, then you'll probably have a bigger dam eventually, because once you crack, you give in. So this, I'm arguing in the book that this love born out of this historicity with the river under this hydraulic pressure to develop was transformed into a political force, unlashing political action while holding people in their dwelling place. And this is what I call Unski Riverine citizenship. And as one fisherman told me, without the Una, I would have left long time ago. It's not ethnicity or the city or the state that's keeping him in place, is the river itself. So I wanted to emphasize that. So all that is nice. However, the last chapter of the book is one where I talk a lot about this sense of imminent loss, that the Una River is now safe from damming. I think the damming on the Una is very unlikely. However, what's killing the river is a very, very prolific development of tourism that's out of control for all sorts of reasons, because the state is so fragmented, so there's very little oversight. So people mobilize on this kind of mobilize on absence of the state. They also feel they need to survive, and everyone feels if they just kind of take care of their own 2 meters of, let's say, access to the river, if they put beton and if they destroy the riverine banks, that nothing will happen because it's only 2 meters. And what's happening is that Una is being destroyed 2 meters at a time because it's becoming a factory of tourism. So this is you can see this even through the national park, but much more beyond that, it's sold as land of water magic, where you can go and escape pressures of the Western world, and you can relax. And while you're relaxing, and you don't have, let's say, in one resort where I stayed, you cannot have Wi-Fi, you cannot, you're supposed to be in the peace oasis. At the same time, you have buses and buses of tourists who are bused from Croatia for a day, and you have crazy like noise and pollution, basically, because infrastructurally places cannot hold that. There's no proper sewage, so all that is slowly destroying the river. So we are witnessing tourism on steroids, where massive bulldozing and cementing of its banks and polluting fish farm production, developing stress-free resorts which degrade river banks and dump tourist waste directly in the river. So this is, I think, the last sentence here, that unlike the dams, this form of destruction is elemental. It's much harder to mobilize against because we all participate in it. We go rafting, we go do Una safari, we go to these restaurants. We don't know if they have a proper sewage system, and we're all kind of, it's really, and also many people empower lawyers, policemen, judges. They have properties that do this kind of thing. So it's really hard to mobilize against something that's seen as 2 meters at a time. So I will conclude. I don't think I have time to go into the epilogue, because I know we have 25 minutes and you maybe have questions, but I will conclude that I think that riverine citizenship, and especially thinking about it via Watershed, has both potentials and limitations. This kind of place-based, embodied, and in place form of politics has a capacity to fold into its ranks everyone who loves the river. So it's much more broadly imagined political and social belonging than the one based on nationalism, ethnicity, and typical identity categories. It doesn't mean, I want to emphasize this, that joining and folding in are absolute. Not everyone is included. There are people who are actually violently excluded because they don't love river in a particular way, right? And I don't think that's a limitation. I think that's actually what makes it political, because politics always has to have its externalities, right? So these gaps and externalities, people who do not love the river, Bagirashin and Betonashin, etc., they return at certain junctions to illuminate the limitations of riverine citizenship. And as I said, that only makes it political. I don't think that's a problem. So I'm not going to go into what happened in Croatia. I'm happy to talk about it in questions and answers. I will not go to this either. I'll just conclude with this. This is an art piece designed by somebody from Bihać, an artist called Azra Hromadžić, who is now actually in the United States. And this is what he created for people to copy and paste. That was his idea, where these brackets are actually the uh, concrete riverine banks, and he says we can decide what to do with them, thicken them, destroy them. But I always like to end with his work because I think it's really inviting to think with. So I think I did it. I did it in 25 minutes. I didn't know I was capable of it. So thank you for testing me that way. So
Thank you so much. Yes, this was an
sure.
amazing summary. Like I didn't even know it was possible to kind of still stay coherent and present the key findings and kind of takeaways, but still do it in 25 minutes. I have a few questions, but if anybody else wants to start instead, um, I can start and then please raise your hand. I don't see any other people. So one of the things, I mean, I guess I was socialized through international relations, right? So I love when anybody else does more anthropological research and then highlights things that I think conventional methods are have a little bit of an issue kind of touching upon. But this book is not just that it does ethnography, it also adds sounds, it adds archival work. There is so much going on. So I wanted to ask you sort of if you could reflect a little bit on kind of that dimension, because I think your work speaks so much to what everybody's really interested in, like the politics, Bosnia, a state that is not functioning as everybody would like it to, but it also highlights an alternative way of thinking about politics in the region that, gives potential to like a new dynamic also happening and highlights some positives in a sort of, a state in crisis or a region in crisis or a world in crisis as we now perceive it. Um,
Well, thank you for that. And hi, Katarina. I'm so glad you're here too. So what the actual question is? You want me to talk precisely more about what?
A
Sorry.
little bit
I
more about like the methodological setup, and then also
okay.
the fact that you've decided to include the recording of a sound inside the book and the video material. So like how you kind of like, I mean, decided to build upon the,
Yeah,
field
sure.
work material that you usually work with.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I can talk about it for the next 20 minutes, but I will not. Because it's not something, it looks, when you look at finished products like books, ethnographies that are books, it looks like it was all carefully thought out, and it's never carefully thought out. It's messy. And I think for me, it matters because in ethnography, which is the main method of cultural anthropology, we ourselves are a tool of research, right? So there's no distance. You have to insert yourself, and the fact that I was who I was matters a lot to how this unfolded, and matters in many positive ways and some problematic ways that were paralyzing at times. So the fact that I was already tenured, so I had a secure job, means that I felt I could go and protest. So protest as a method was something that I did think about in relation to, okay, my brother doesn't live in Bihać, doesn't depend on their salary. Because the city employs 70% of people in town, right? Or 70% of employed people work for the city. So you cannot easily protest. That explains why only 50, 60 of us showed up, while many people showed support differently. But I did go, as one of the methods to participate in protest, because I felt I was not touched by it directly. My parents were already retired. My brother wasn't there. However, my second cousin didn't have her contract with the city renewed because they follow these intimate attachments. And for a whole year, I was paralyzed basically because she said, "I'm so glad you protested, but I don't have a job." I want to, mention again what it means to do ethnography of these kinds of issues, that people who are maybe not such good leaders in terms of politics and imagination are extremely good at maneuvering the field and making people not do what they want to do in terms of activism and pushing against. And you think you have all the ducks in order, and then you realize, oh my God, I'm being pressured differently. I didn't even conceptualize they could do something like this. So that obviously taught me a lot in terms of how to be in the field. And then the second, so other things, investigative journalism. So again, I wouldn't do this kind of book, which is again eclectic. It has uh, personal archival research. It has typical ethnography. It has this kind of cooperation with. I think my things are dying. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It has cooperation with Amir Husak, who is much more capable than I am in terms of recording the river. He had the microphones and all the equipment. I only had ethnographic know-how. So I relied on other people, and collaboration with him in the river. But the fact was also that I could be so promiscuous only because I was already tenured and I could write a book that was different.
Mm.
So what you have in the book is also places where you can click and listen to the river too. And I wanted open access. I didn't have to go with American publisher because I already had tenure. I decided to be a little bit more free. This is the book I couldn't write first. This is the book I had to write second. So all these things impacted my decisions, right? I had a little more freedom, but then I also learned that I was slapped on the face when I protested, right? So it's constant negotiation of how far you can go. One thing that I absolutely love doing is personal archive of Boško Mariano. It was a totally different world. It was one big box full of his stuff and materials he wrote. And that's something I was never trained to do archival work, but being with that for months at a time and was so healing and in so many ways. That was soon after my dad passed away. So being with this box and paying tribute to socialism and understanding the vision of this person that actually established such an organization that was present in 97 countries of the world. And his vision of what Bihać and Bihać children could be, it was just so healing and so beautiful. So I kind of decided to just go with the flow, just like the river, but I didn't want to fully also leave politics behind. I'm a political anthropologist, so a lot of my theorizing is still from political theory, and
Mhm.
so did I
Thank you.
answer the question?
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
I
you did.
did. Okay. Hey,
Renee,
Emina is there too. Oh. Yeah.
Renee also had a question. Renee, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I would like to start with an anecdote. I also did a short ethnography in Bihać, and Una was my reference point.
Huh.
I'm from Rijeka, right? So like I just sort of gravitated towards the river. So there is something there. But that's my question. I'm a sociologist, but I also love ethnographies. It's my drug. And something that struck me about your conversation is how this natural formation is like a sticky surface where so much meaning gets attached and sort of unpacks. And I was thinking of South Africa where I was in Cape Town, and there's no river there, but there is a huge mountain from which every single part of the city is visible. All the different racial and class categories come together because they sort of converge in the mountain. So I like this because I also, in my current research here, I'm exploring the border between Italy, Slovenia, and Croatia, and I'm using the physical world again as an entry point in negotiating a transnational identity. Um, what aspects of this are specific to a river as such? And I think there is something special there. And to what extent is this a conversation between the way in which humans interact with the physical world versus the sort of artificial world of borders, if that makes sense as a question.
Oh, totally. It's
Okay.
so beautiful. By the way, let's meet if you're in Rijeka in July. I'm meeting with Dina already, so I will
I
be there
am,
for the
I am.
first. Yeah, first 10 days of July I'm in Rijeka, so please, let's because this is beautiful and this is precisely what often happens when I'm lucky enough to have informed audience and they say, "Huh, this sounds just like a lake in this part of the world," or "This sounds like that forest," right? So people are able to see how this travels beyond the river. The river has its own unique materiality, right? So that, as you say, has to be recognized, right? It has to be recognized. It's unique, and not the Una is especially unique because it does have that structure that even Patagonia made a movie about. So it is unique in its own structure, but as this kind of formation of meaning making for people who live around who live in the world that we call natural world. Again, we are dealing with Western epistemologies, and I think you're hinting at, indigenous scholarship that destroys these kinds of boundaries. And if we keep that kind of, let's say we live in the context of natural world, most people say, "Oh, yeah, I kind of have that relationship, and this is my orientation." And I think this is what you're hinting at, is that how certain places become places of orientation in history, geography, politics, right? And I'm not saying that if you told people in Bihać right now, Una is a human being, they do create a lot of, they give Una lots of people-like qualities, but I don't think they can still think about Una being just like any other person. Right. And this is why I did not, eventually it might be there are two lawyers who are working on possibly establishing that for the Una, but I didn't want to write a book from the river's point of view, which is something that people did about forests, can follow forest thing, right? But about that relationship, and this is exactly what I think you're hitting at, that this relationship is way beyond the Una River. It transgresses typical way of thinking politics. At the same time, they're all kind of localized due to this unique materiality of each of these formations. So I'm fully with you. It's transferable. So it's not generalizable, but it's transferable. And I think that's what good ethnography does. I think it's not about making general laws. It's about you recognizing something about South Africa in the story of the Una. That's transferability. And that's the power of ethnography. So I think you and I have to talk. So I want to learn more. And I love this, Istria. Do you know work by Pamela Bellinger
Yeah, 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 of
on
course, of
his
course. Very, very interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so good. It's so good. Anyhow, I would love to learn more if you
And
have time.
yeah,
So,
I'd love to. I'm moving to Belgium at the end of July, but I'll be here during the first 3 weeks. Something I want to say, and I'm sorry Katarina left because I sort of presented this idea of the natural interacting with man-made borders, and she also said that we also have to be careful because there's also a risk of
of
co-opting
course.
that for
Right.
exploitation. So I'm
Right.
sorry she's
Of
not here
course.
because I wanted to hear
Right.
that as well. So yeah.
Of course. And there's always risk in that. Like every time you name something, it becomes something that's grabbable, right? And it's the question is, okay, how do you maneuver that? And you also don't want to over romanticize it. This is one thing that it's not something romantic, it's deeply political. And that's why I'm saying there's violence in it. And you see in chapter 5, there are people who are really violently excluded, even those who don't know how to swim. Right. If you don't know how to swim, you cannot love it properly. Right. I mean, there are ways in which that's why it's so political, but it's political according to new kind of um, coordinates of politics. And I think that's what makes it exciting potentially. And also, I think one thing that I want to emphasize is during the Croatia dam building in the huge protest that happened in 2024, where people from Bihać went to Serb to support the population of Serbs basically living around the string of the river. And then Runde came and everyone else. People were very much aware of real borders, real of topography. They actually calculated when to cross the border, not to go in big groups. It's not like that disappears. That's still there. It's the infrastructure of international relations, as Ajda just said, right? This is real, but people are not letting that determine how they act politically. They maneuver around it. They're sometimes afraid of it, right? But they're at the same time still doing other forms of coming together and acting together below, above, in between. And I think this is what this thinking with Watershed allows us to grasp, not to say that other stuff doesn't matter. Anyone who crosses into these spaces knows it matters, and you know, anyone who was stopped at the border and whose passport was, you know, re-examined and re-examined knows that these are real things. It's not like they disappear. It's just about how they're maneuvered given Watershed as a new political imaginary or a force, right? So that's what I want to, because I think that's also implicit in Katarina's, you know, comment to your presentation, or and I'm sad she left as well, but I'm so glad she showed up. She showed up a little bit. Destroying, I'm destroying this place, sorry. So
Do we have any other questions? If
Amina is ready.
Emina, please come.
Yes, please come, Amina. You know where I'm
Hi.
sitting. She's been to my house, so she
I
knows where I
have
am.
been. Hi, Azra. I miss you so
Hi.
much.
I miss
I
you too.
just to say hi, and I promise I will read your whole book after I finish my PhD dissertation. I promise. I have one question. What was for you the most challenging part during your fieldwork, but also writing process?
Well, I think the most challenging was definitely that recognition that as an ethnographer, you're not this autonomous subject who, you know, it's just me. But when you do recognition, also that doing ethnography in your hometown is very different from doing ethnography, let's say in Mostar for the first book, in which I was totally, you know, somebody from north, from Bosnia. And Bosnia, they imagined as something gray and far away. And here I am in my hometown where I'm read in so many different ways, both celebrated as somebody, you know, who made it in the US and is a professor, whatever, and then somebody who is very local and very connected in ways that people know and decide to mobilize when needed, right? So learning that ethnography, like that doing hometown ethnography comes with its own set of advantages. I could do something, Amina, in 4 days that my friend and colleague Elisa Helms, it took her 7 months to do, just because of my access. And then on the other hand, I was also constantly disciplined because I'm also daughter of this person who was the you know, goalie of Jedinstvo Bihać before the war. Like, so you have all this baggage that's both advantageous and being honest about it. So I think when my cousin lost her job, that was the hardest, like that really, because it's not just me, it's people who are seen as attached to me. And I think that that's a corrective narrative. In terms of writing, I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed writing this book. I think maybe finding that tone that, I mean, it felt natural, how much I'm hopeful and how much I'm already mourning the death of the river. Like how I'm both at the same time is something that I think was really hard to find, that tone, that I'm not too romanticizing or too optimistic. And I think my worry is, and this happens a lot, people don't read to chapter 6 and they think it's all about love and you know, it's beautiful, even though love in this book is not just beautiful, it's also limiting and violent, because love magnetizes all sorts of emotions. But then, you know, that people don't come to chapter 6 and see touristification, destruction, slow death, all that. So they think the book is not covering that. So that's something maybe in right. Would I change it? I don't know how. I think it has to be what it is, but I cannot count on people reading all chapters. That's what I learned. So I don't know if I answered it, but I tried. I know you guys
Yes,
have to go
yes,
soon.
thank
So
you so much.
yes, I cannot wait to see you.
Do we have any other questions? So my question then is, I mean, there are two, there are more, but like two I've been thinking of for like a little bit. One is like, how do you see this book kind of connecting to the previous work you've been doing, and how it like, what does it kind of highlight that the previous work and book maybe didn't get to as much in detail to kind of showcase? And then the other is the role of technology. Because I always like, I mean, in my own work, I sometimes look at like how young people like to use technologies, and like, you know, it's thought about often as the third place. Like we often put a lot of importance to it, like it will save democracy. It's like freer, there's like space to
Yeah.
talk, there are no borders, but at the same time it's so regulated, like there are so many limitations to it, and also like it's destroying the environment in so many ways. So there is this
Right.
contradiction that I never know really how to touch upon. So
Mhm.
how do you
Yeah, beautiful questions again, not easy. Let me start with the second one. It's a little bit easier, and I think many of us are grappling with that, you know, technology. And this is again another contradiction because that's how people are, and that's what life is like, right? The technology here, especially in both protests, technology was crucial. And I'm talking about old school technology, you know, people going and filming a meeting that we didn't know what was happening close to the national park. And these four boys who started this small NGO go and learn about it and film it, and this becomes viral. And then we have actually engineers from Florence responding to it, wanting to be part of the protest, right? So this ability of a moment to be documented. And we see that especially in the case of Croatian protests or protests in Croatia, when this very small group of desolate, you know, residents who live, again, slijepo crijevo of Croatia, at the end of the world in Croatia, like no one even thinks about it, how they were able to mobilize people from the center, not only Zagreb, Zadarska Županija, but also people from the world, you know, to come and support them. And this is a group of technologically kind of savvy women who did this. So we see the power of that. And then at the same time, of course, we know that all this technology is requiring so much from the environment, is destroying possibly. And like now I heard, and this is when I gave a talk very recently also on Zoom in Tuzla. And I learned that actually Bosnia is becoming interesting to AI data center companies because Bosnia has all this water, right? So now we're dealing with, you know, another kind of threat. And I told the person who told me to send me, to send me links because it is exactly what you're saying. It's like how, you know, that I'm not surprised that Bosnia is possibly that, but I haven't read anything about it. So this is me just thinking with your question. The first question, you know, on the surface, there's no much in between. I think what happened, the reason why that's the case is, first of all, this book about the River Una, I've been writing since I was probably 6 years old. When I was sitting by on the bank of the river and said, if I ever have a daughter, it will be named Una. You know, this is something that has been bubbling inside of me for a very long time. So this book kind of comes before the first one in some ways, just in terms of how long it has been sedimenting inside of me, my brain and my body. So it kind of felt like I was writing it for decades already. And of course, it has its own particular structure because of the events that happened. And one reason why they seem not so similar, I mean, my writing style is similar, you know, the tone, obviously. One is that I'm different. And when I was doing research because ethnographer is a tool of research, as ethnographer changes, so does everything else. So when I was in Mostar, I was 27 years old. I was young, blonde, very athletic, and I was hanging out and smoking with kids under the bridge, right? Here I am, you know, much older, different life stage, and different kind of politics in Bihać, and obviously in my hometown, and things are palpably different. So I'm different, setting is different. So on the surface, there's no much continuity, I think. But I think broadly, if somebody would come from the outside, they would say, oh, okay, this is another type of ethnography. I think I'd write a certain kind of ethnography. And I think both my ethnographic style is very present in both, right? And I think that's what connects them. But also there's a lot of changes that have happened. The context itself, me as a researcher, all that, and that's reflected in the book. So I don't, you know, I'm just kind of thinking again on top of my head, thinking with all of you, because many of you do ethnography and these things do matter. If I try to do the research I was doing in Mostar now, I don't think I would have the same access to those bathrooms and smoking that I had when I was young. And, because when I even went back to see if the bathrooms are there, they thought I was some inspector was like, no, I smoke with you. Like, no, I don't smoke, but I smoke, But I'm not in a spectrum, I'm one of you. And they're like, I don't think so, lady. So, it matters. So
Great.
I think you all got it, right?
It's
Azra,
kind
can I just quickly jump in? Was the
Sure.
UWC open when you wrote that book?
Yes. And I mention it, not much, but it's lovely. I go every other year, I give a talk. They read my book. It's so amazing to me. They have an anthropology class and they read my book. So that was their first year too. So I witnessed all these things. So they're part of it, but they're definitely mentioned in it. Because that school is not just the school. The school is a world. So yeah, hierarchical, very much. Yeah. So yeah,
but I
I'm
think it's
happy to talk about the book some other time because that was our first idea, right? To talk about that book, but we'll see. Who knows?
um do we have any final questions? I mean, we have a lot of conversations to have, but unfortunately, due to the event that we have later on, we have kind of run out of the time. But I want to
Your
say,
event is in 2 minutes, right?
Come
It's
to
not later
Rijeka.
on, it's now.
Come
yes,
to Rijeka, we'll all go to the beach and we have lots of
I am
conversations, I
coming.
think.
I'm in Rijeka July 1st. I
Good.
am. I'm always in Rijeka. I'm in Rijeka every year, so
no,
because it's one of my spots on the map. And I just have to do more with the university, I think. It's just because, my brother is there, so I feel it's like his space. So, but maybe maybe I have to intrude, right, Tina?
We're the building next to his
Right,
building.
right.
So
He can have
let's
his
say
very
building.
close.
I don't like their building. It's too windy there. Like it's weird.
yeah,
I want that building. Yeah.
it's windy also here at our building, but we can see each other from the windows.
We can throw
Yeah.
rocks.
I think we need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Azra,
Yes.
thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen.
Thank
And I will
you.
have a lot of questions once you arrive here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will let Ajda to also
No. Thank you, Tina, for organizing this, and thank you, Azra, so much for taking the time. I wish we had more time to ask more questions and just to have a conversation, but we'll have to do it in RECAS, and Tina will have to
Tina is
reorganize
organizing the
we
party.
have to
Yeah.
go to the beach and
No, but
talk
seriously,
about it.
really.
That's really hard.
Yeah,
That's really
So hard.
maybe go to Tres. Maybe go to Tres.
Maybe.
You should.
maybe.
Well, it was lovely. I enjoyed seeing some familiar faces, meeting new people to think with. Go to whatever you have to do next, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in Rijeka, some of you in Florence, some of you in Bosnia. Stay in touch, and this was lovely. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for taking the
Thank you.
time.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
Absolutely. Ciao.
Bye bye.